Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm going to review the very first season of Titans. I honestly think that this show is probably very difficult to review. Not just because of how, I am kind of severely on the fence about this show. Um, because ultimately, my feelings of this show are very 50-50, but they're kind of very 50-50 in polar opposites. Meaning it's either like I really like the show or really don't like the show. So it's kind of a weird tug of war with my real and true thoughts about this show. But I'm also having to think about it in a rational sense of how to legitimately break this down. Because ultimately, this might be my only DC universe experience, meaning that a lot of people could say, "Oh, well, this show was better," or "That show was, oh, you should check this out," and this and that, which I ultimately will probably not be able to get to. Um, so, cause I just got disc copies of the first season of the show. I did not go out of my way to subscribe to said DC universe, so it's not like I'm gonna all you're. It's not like all of a sudden you're gonna see a huge flood of DC Universe content on this channel. You might just see this, and that might be it. I don't know. So, reasonably, at the end of the day, I could just say that reasonably, my thoughts were to go into DC Universe probably only to really just watch this show. This show will probably live and die on whether or not I have any future fascination with DC Universe as a app like service. Which ultimately I feel that and I have to it's really hard to review this. So let's break it down in a non-spoiler then spoiler variation. At first, I'm gonna have to break it down for people who haven't heard about this show. I'm gonna break it down for people who um, are thinking about being on the fence about investing in the DC universe to go into this show, and this and that and so on and so forth. So, reasonably, the DC universe show of Titans. Some people in some certain countries might have gotten this show on Netflix, but not everybody. Some people may have gotten this show, like I said, through a disc, through discs, whether Blu-ray or DVD on in some Target somewhere or something like that. Or some people might have invested in the DC Universe app and saw all the content that the DC Universe has. So, first off, for people who don't know Titans, Titans is really just a show about a lot of sidekicks. Uh, we have the not every one of them really are sidekicks. A lot of them are just kind of random esque like superheroes that if you aren't fully really aware of the Teen Titans, you probably will not know who these people are. And reasonably, if people are going to go into this show not knowing who the Teen Titans are, I honestly and truly believe that you need to be fans of this show or you need to be fans of these characters prior to this show. You need a full immersive kind of prerequisite to these characters before going into this show, or almost kind of knowledge of the DC comic booking landscape to kind of understand who some of the people are. I think ultimately, if I were to showcase people this show that might not be really aware of DC-esque like characters, I might have to walk them through the show and mention certain characters that pop up and just be like, yeah, this guy, yeah. Yeah, this guy, yeah, this is these people, and these people, yeah, yeah. Anyways, one upside to this show, I love the action. The action is really cool. It's actually realistic, and it actually seems like everybody's really not pulling their punches, even though clearly it's a TV show. I'm sure people are, but if anything, it really feels like, excuse me, it really feels like realistic fights. It really feels like, to me, this show was kind of presented in a very much like Netflix Daredevil kind of way. Um, so the show feels realistic. Feels when the fight scenes are there, it's like, huh, all right, this is yeah. They sold me on the action aspect of it reasonably for the characters. It seems like the new things that are presented, uh, like some of them in my eyes, because of how vastly knowledgeable I am about DC stuff, it doesn't seem new to me, but I guess the showcasing things that are put into the show, I can be happy about. But overall, a lot of characters in this show were extremely nerfed. Meaning, a lot of the characters that I really enjoy don't have much to really give on this show. Like, it seems like Robin is the real true person that can do anything in this show because he's the guy that otherwise is one uh if you need a person to fight on this show, have this guy be presented. It just seems like a lot of people are just there to just kind of stand around because a lot of the characters don't have a personality. Especially the main characters that are really supposed to be selling you this show, because there are some characters that are added into the show that were, I think, supposed to get their own separate series but never did, so they were just kind of stuck on this show. um it seems like this show was in desperation to tell you really cool things. Oh my god, guys, yeah, this character is gonna be in this show. And doesn't it sound really, really awesome that this character is in this show? And you're like, oh, and you're just like, oh my god, this person is in this show. I've been waiting for a show to showcase this character and showcase it in this way. Ah. But then at the end of the day, when actually watching the show does not showcase that character good enough, or isn't this character isn't in this show long enough to justify the excitement for having said character on said show. Um, Reasonably, even though this is a DC Universe show, this show budget wise feels like a CW show. It does! It feels cheap. But then at the end of the day, I can just say at least they're trying to do something. They're trying to put something out there. They're trying to do something different. But then at the end of the day, I have to groan about how certain characters are presented within this show because it seems like a bummer. It seems like a bummer. It does. Um, but characters have no personality within the show. I honestly and really truly think because a lot of these characters can act on this show. The only people that I think do act well are seasoned actors. And those seem very, like, obvious who those people are. If anything, I guess we can really go into this. Hawk and Dove. People are aware that these two people are in this show. And to me, I honestly think that these characters being put into the show at first, I kind of scoffed. I was like, Hawk and Dove, I do not give a rip about these characters. Why should I care about these characters? And funny enough, these characters are probably the best characters in the show. Every time they're put into the show, I probably like them more so than anybody else in the show. I honestly like that it seemed like Hawk and Dove. I believe, from what I was told, the reason why there's so much showcased on the show, because ultimately these people were supposed to get a separate show but never did. So evidently they're just on the Titans show. But reasonably, there is one thing that I have to say about this show. This show commits to absolutely nothing. This show doesn't commit to anything. And doesn't quite it doesn't quite feed your appetite for certain characters if you know who they are. Um but I think there is a very interesting spin on the Bruce and Dick dynamic within the show that I honestly find very interesting. How, looking at it, um like, from how whenever anybody brings up Bruce to Dick, is kind of very it's kind of really fun and interesting. Um and to look at this person's story arc, because again, this show jumps all over the goddamn place. It doesn't commit to anything. It jumps around a lot, um to the point where I like this show is really like trying to follow the bouncing ball. It seems like some of the recaps that they give with episode to episode honestly don't make sense. It seems like in the recaps they bring up characters that honestly and truly don't need to be recapped. It seems weird. Anyways, so reasonably, the this show does weird things with certain characters, and like one of a kind things that I kind of groan about. But then again, I can honestly understand why these people need to be placed the way they do, because um, I can see how maybe the collection of this group together makes sense in the way that they write them in, to group them together, but it just seems kind of random, or it just seems kind of coincidental, or it just like, yeah, just seems kind of just yeah, it's just kind of weird. The villains that are placed within this show are a giant letdown. The villains in this show are a giant letdown. Basically, it seems like when you have to question any of the villains why they're doing what they're doing, it doesn't really seem like they have a real legitimate reason. Or if anything, it kind of has to be left down to that you have minion-esque like characters going after said heroes. You have like gangsters and kind of like crooked-esque like people and stuff like that. Or even when you do have legitimate comic book referenced like villains, they aren't used the right way. People that Villains that do have comic book name value are not presented the way they're presented in the comic book at all. So you're saying this is the person that everyone should fear, and I don't understand why. Even the characters that are even more so notable in comic books that are supposedly presented within the show, if anybody told you, oh my god, this character that is very well known is in this show, they're probably used in seconds, and reasonably the only thing that you really see is most of the time the back of their head, or you see them in some kind of uh scenario where their face is covered, or they're like you can barely tell it's a certain esque big named character. If anything, reasonably for people to say that, I guess we can say it because it feels like people have said it a lot. People would say that Batman is in this show. I don't know about season 2, but I would say season 1, Bruce is as existent in this show as he probably is in the Batwoman show, which is pretty much non existent at all. And people can argue with me in that, and I can understand that argument. Because there is one episode where people could argue with me on that, but I can really say that Batman Bruce is really and truly a non-entity within season 1. And it seems like whenever everything is a reference. You can never see the face of anything. Cause I just think that like it's funny how they go out of their way to try to write these things in here and try to make so many things non-existent. It's hilarious. Unless they're absolutely doing a show about it, and then everything else is basically non-existent, and it's hilarious. Anyways, so the show goes all over the place. The show doesn't commit to anything, and the show has such a weird and wild ending that I think has absolutely nothing to do really with the story. It just kind of does this offshoot thing to look really cool towards the end of the season. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, oh my god, this is just like a Justice League episode that I've seen before. But it's done with a different person. Of course, being a leader of said team, of course, this is going to be done via this person because he's the leader of this team. So, yeah, I'll get into that in spoiler variation. So, yeah, so man, but this show is so good though. There's good things about it, but you just kind of have to kind of go through the murky waters of things that you do not like to find the things that you do. Reasonably, Starfire in this show, I think I probably liked her character the least. There was nothing about this character that made her feel existent on this show. She felt like a non-existent character. She was just a person to put in here that had power, that could be used against supposed villains that had questionable powers that were never showcased excuse me, ever on said show. So I do not know why Starfire if she ever did, seemed relevant on the show because of something that I will talk about in spoilers. So at the end of the day, I would say at the end of the day, watch this show. You'll probably get a vastly different experience than I did. At the end of the day, I think overall people do like this show. I don't think there's anybody that absolutely downright hates this show. Some people might pick apart this show for how bad it is or how cheap it feels or how whatever, but this is coming from Warner Brothers. This shouldn't be any different um, than anything else. Like where Warner Brothers had to desperately ask Netflix for money to get shows being put out there, which I don't understand why. Why isn't all of these shows aren't presented on Netflix everywhere in the world? Why is it that it seems like Netflix is only showcasing some of these shows on certain portions of the world? I think it's only I think Titans is only showcasing on Netflix in like Canada, I believe. I could be wrong. I think it should be showcased everywhere. Um, I know Doom Patrol is being showcased on the DC Universe app and the HBO app because evidently they're tied to both of those. I don't know why. It's weird. Anyways, so reasonably, I could say any of the villains that are presented if I haven't mentioned it already. Um, it seems like every villain. It seems like Teen Titans has really the smallest rogues gallery that I've ever seen in my life. But it seems like they add something new into the villain spin of things this season. But then again, the villains that were presented were very underwhelming, very very underwhelming. Um, but then of course they go to the same old song and dance story that we've heard a bajillion times if you've ever seen a Teen Titans story ever in your life. It's always the same story since the dawn of time of Teen Titans. There's only seemingly one way to go with Teen Titans, and this is the way they go again. And I'm assuming in season 2, they're going with another Teen Titans story that you've heard of over and over and over again. Because it seems like the Titans only have, like, really realistically, like, 2 actual villains. And then everything else is just kind of commingled in there together. And I'm just like, God, I'm so exhausted when I hear that like they're going with this story again with Titans. I just want to emotionally weep at this point when I hear this. Like, God, can't you just give me anything different? Can't you just give me anything different, please? Just give me anything. Anything besides that. I will watch anything. If you want to make up some weird, goofy villain that absolutely makes zero sense to bring up in this show, I will. I will be emphatically excited. But other than that, if you're gonna give me the same old song and dance, I'm gonna feel gigantically ripped off. Like it's like, really? God, I'm so sick of this. I am so sick of this kind of villain being put in this show again. I'm so tired of it. I'm so tired of it. So, I think now is the time to really go into spoilers for me to really go into this show because, again, you have to have like a prerequisite really to go into this show and know these people prior to actually being into this show. And it seems like a character like Raven, her powers are very weird in this show. And her powers are really not well and defined at all. It's just kind of like whatever the story needs, that's what Raven does. Um, like that's what really Raven is. I honestly am not fully immersed in Starfire either, but looking at her, if I'm even saying that character's name correctly, it seems like whatever they need for this character, they kind of almost just kind of write her in there as well. Um, and the person that shows up at the very end of this season, I am so excited to know that this guy, I hope, is going to be really well used in the next season. But then again, from how he's showcased at the end of this show, I'm just like, oh, wow. But then I'm also on the villain side, to where there's also a villain that appears seemingly at the very scale end of season one, and I'm like, so I'm not having a lot of hope into season two. But then again, I really liked this season, even though I also really didn't like this season. I'm so back and flippy floppy forth. So, I think it's that time to spoil this show, to, talk about it as if people had watched it. Because there's only so many times I can talk about this cryptically. So at the end of the day, spoilers. How long did I talk about? Spoilers! This is probably going to have to forcibly be a very long review of this show. I think it has to be. It has to be that way. Because there's so much stuff to get into. And plus, this is like 11 episodes. So we needed to get a lot of stuff. So, Titans. We have Dick Grayson as a cop. And I roll my eyes severely. I do not like that Dick Grayson is a police officer. If Dick Grayson could have been anything besides a cop, I would have just been like, yay! But no. Dick Grayson has to be a beat cop. I'm like, so basically, somebody must have just liked the Tim Drake story where Tim Drake was a cop. So they immediately were just like, are we gonna put Tim Drake in this show or Dick Grayson? I guess it really doesn't matter. Let's just whoever he is, we'll just make him a beat cop. All right, sounds good. Just it feels like they fused Tim Drake and Dick Grayson together because they weren't sure of who exactly to put as Robin. But then they're like, well, but yeah, we have to have Jason Todd in the show too. Oh crap. Well, Jason Todd can't be Red Hood. He's gotta be Robin. You kinda have to give an origin of Jason Todd on this show. Crap, I really want Tim Drake to be on the show though, but yeah, but F it, let's just make Dick a cop. So I really like how Dick really hates Bruce. Like, Robin hates Batman, and when looking back on it, how Grayson never wanted to live with Bruce, but ultimately people were saying it's like, but dude, you'll never live so well in your life. And Dick is just going, yeah, I guess. And then ultimately, knowing full well how much he eventually, like from day zero, had already moaned and groaned about being involved with Bruce, and now wants nothing to do with the Batman family, and is kind of as much as possible separating himself, to where he realizes that eventually he gets quickly replaced because he's replaceable in Bruce's eyes. um, is kind of a very interesting story. I think that is really very interesting, but eventually I'm like, well, I wanted Red Hood in this show. I did not want Jason Todd as a Robin. I just, I'm like, I don't want a young punk kid Robin. I just don't. I really liked that Robin was a much more older. I liked that Grayson was a much more older Grayson, and I was excited for the notion of hoping that we weren't going to get a young Robin, but we got one regardless. And I was like, I don't want any young Robin. I don't want Damian. I don't want Tim Drake as a young Robin. I don't want any young Robin. They all have to be. They all have to be graduated. They all have to be Red Robins or Red Hoods or anybody other than a young Robin. I do not want a young Robin. I want an older, experienced Robin. Sadly enough, we had to have a young Robin somewhere. Anyways, so like I said, everybody is nerfed on this show. Reasonably, when you look at the Teen Titans cartoon, it seems like Raven has a personality of just being this brooding, kind of emo grunge girl, which isn't really showcased on this show. She's just this like, well, my life sucks and I have this scary thing that keeps coming into my mirrors and this sucks. And we have Starfire that, from what I remember in the cartoons, was these like bubbly personality like girl, like, yay, everything's fun and yeah. And I'm an alien from outer space and look at me. In this show, Starfire has no clue of who she is. And whenever stuff does come up, she kind of remembers things here and there, or Raven helps her kind of remember some things by doing some Raven mind meld, because whatever these people need in this show, Raven provides. So we have it to where Starfire is just evidently this stripper for these hooligans. Evidently showcasing that she needs to still be like the most attractive looking Teen Titan, or just Titan at this point. Because she has to wear like seductive looking clothes. But you know what? When years pass, she ultimately changes her hair and then is just. She doesn't stand out to me. She's just a normal looking person when years pass on. So Starfire eventually just never really seemed to have any kind of real and true relevancy to the show at all, besides being a person that has powers. That's about a quick shelf life that she has. Basically, her powers are basically the equivalents of Superman's. She needs the sun to have power. So she's basically the equivalent of Superman, but man, does she really not. Like, it seems like her powers quickly fizzle out. More so than Superman's ever have. Like, it doesn't seem like her powers are as well as the cartoons were. So it just kind of like renders her basically useless at a lot of portions of time, especially during night. So you can only really go full Teen Titans roster only during certain times of the day. How ridiculous is that? And then you have Beast Boy, who in the Teen Titans show could transform to a T-Rex, a dog, I think in Teen Titans Go he turned into like Animal from the Muppets. He turned into a beaver, raccoon, any pig. any number of things. In this show, he is from Congo, and ultimately you would think Congo. I remember the movie Congo. So I'm assuming, like, if this guy is from Congo, you would think he would turn into a gorilla a lot of the times, or an ape, or some kind of primate like thing. But bizarrely, instead, the entire time, this guy transforms from a man to a tiger, and the entire time he has to do this, he has to switch between his clothes, tearing off his clothes to turn into said tiger. Which ultimately they go into the Mystery Man like joke where eventually he has to transform from being tiger to being normal man, and eventually people have to eventually see him naked. And I'm like, this is stupid. This is stupid. So we have Beast Boy, who is not only nerfed, but so this character seems to really just be like, we need powerhouses on this show. Like, that is the good thing about Teen Titans is, like, yeah, you can have a Robin, and yeah, he doesn't have powers, but man, is he cool. But then, like, you would have other characters that would make up for the fact that Robin is just a normal guy. But in this, like, these people's powers are so useless that no one's a powerhouse in this team. Nobody is intriguing enough to see that this team is a viable thing to watch past one season, or probably in my eyes past a couple episodes, because once you get Hawk and Dove in there, you're like, Hawk and Dove, yeah, and that's bizarre to say because I've seen Hawk and Dove in so many other things, and I thought that they were completely irrelevant. But man, do I love the Hawk and Dove backstory, kind of tailoring it back to when Hawk and Dove was two brothers, and to where Dove was a guy. To where ultimately they eventually show you in a bizarrish way why Hawk and Dove changed to just being a girl and guy, because ultimately, yeah, there was a car crash that caused that to be the case. Kind of weird. Um, there was no, I will avenge you, brother, I will avenge you, mother. No, it's just some bizarrish car crash that happened that ultimately just led them to eventually just be heroes regardless, because they were mourning the loss of their brothers and mothers. And so eventually they just turned to be a couple together. Um, I thought it was extremely on the nose that Robin had to be tied with every single bird superhero in the DC world. So, Robin Dick Grayson had to be tied with, let's see here. So, he had to be tied with Hawk and Dove, and Raven, and then let's just say Robin had to be with other Robin. And so, which never led Dick Grayson Robin to ever change his costume or name or nothing, realizing that Batman has moved on and created a new Robin. No, Robin, through this entire season, even when burning his costume and saying that he is now Robin no more, there is nothing else that people can just call him besides Dick Grayson. And here's the thing, from what I remember, Robin would never want to share his identity with anyone in the team. But I guess we're breaking this law ridiculously just for story's sake, because Robin really isn't actually Robin in this show, supposedly. But he's Robin because he can't do anything else. But So, like, realistically, I think in this show they kind of showcase that Robin really isn't Robin in this show. He's Nightwing. But then again, he doesn't actually become Nightwing until season 2. Which I'm assuming, bizarrely, that I think season 2 probably does have some kind of like time leap off or something, like Justice League or Young Justice did, where all of a sudden there might be like a reference to season 1 and then it jumps to like 5 years later or something like that, where it's like, hey guys, we just so happened to just defeat Trigon. And now 5 years later, it's just because I don't think that this show will commit to anything. Um, I don't think that this show will go out of its way to really like commit to stuff. It just won't. I do really like the Doom Patrol episode. Ultimately, knowing Beast Boy's origin story, I'm like, oh my god, are they gonna go the Doom Patrol route? And surefire enough, once I started to see, I think his name is like Robot Man or something like that, and then I started seeing Negative Man, and I started seeing, I think her name is Plastic Girl, or Elastigirl or whatever her name is. I don't really remember her name on Doom Patrol, but um, and then when I started seeing like all the other Doom Patrolists, like People Chief and this and that and whatever, um, knowing full well that like Chief is kind of very much like a Xavier type. He has like mind stuff, but looking at it, it doesn't seem like they might be doing that in this show. I don't know. Um, and from what I've heard, Cyborg is supposedly going to be joining the roster somewhere down the line. I don't know. I haven't watched Doom Patrol. Anyways, but it does look fascinating though. I looking at this show and seeing Doom Patrol, I'm like, man, I'm so intrigued about Doom Patrol. I wanted to see that show regardless. But it looks really interesting now that I got to see these people for the first time and kind of see like what their experience can be. Um, to me, this feels like a very for Marvel people kind of feels very much like a Fantastic Four kind of like uh people, the Doom Patrol. So if you're on the fence about watching Doom Patrol, I think Doom Patrol is a much more beneficial show to watch than probably this one. And Doom Patrol actually has money in it compared to this show. Anyways, so we have it to where Robin and Raven have a huge portion of story being taken up, whether it's Robin's daddy issues or Raven's dark past or her trying to find some kind of nuns to protect her or some kind of a religious thing that seems to be the symbol of God to try and protect her using crosses and stuff like that, to think that ultimately if by the hand of God she can be protected, which I'm like, no, you need to try to go out of your way to try to control this thing, not let it control you. But it seems like Raven does seem to, at points in time, use her power um, to either heal people or kind of do weird off the cuff things where ultimately she can't exactly control it and somebody has to step in and stop her or prevent her or whatever. And she tends to kill a lot of people as well. But her kind of very dark, scary story or scary character that she has is really kind of very much interesting. Knowing full well now that I hear that there's going to be Justice League Dark is going to be like, interesting. I'm kind of much more fascinated in Justice League Dark. I'm like, ooh, ah. But I heard that that's going to be another HBO show. So I'm like, oh, great, another show that. Because DC Universe cannot do, like. DC Universe, I think, eventually is going to have to just get dissolved. Because I just think that people are eventually going to just be like, oh, well, this was really nice, but this DC universe is eventually going to run out of content to showcase on here. Eventually, there isn't enough money to be put into a DC universe show. So, sadly enough, anything new is just going to be put on HBO. They even ran out of money to do Swamp Thing, hence why how short it is. So reasonably, like, even looking at DC Universe, it's probably a thing to just kind of watch a lot of stuff all at once and then probably just kind of leave. It's probably just like whatever your subscription is for like 1 month. Watch a ton of crap in 1 month and then just jump off. Because I think that's about as much as DC Universe is really worth. Because at the end of the day, um, looking at it, I just don't think that this app really has enough legs left in it already to keep spitting out new content. I think it's going to eventually just get to the point where is there anything new going to be added onto here? No. Well, then what's the point of paying X amount of stuff to be on here and be on here for a long distance amount of time? So, looking at it, we have the nuclear family. That if you were to go on a Wikipedia somewhere and look up the power set of the nuclear family, absolutely none of those powers were showcased in this show at all. The only thing that was showcased about this family is that they were strong and that they could fight. Other than that, you're showcasing the nuclear family that in all actuality there's no justifiable reason for them to be here besides you showcasing something new that people have not seen. And let's talk about it. Trigon. Trigon. How many hundreds of times have we heard of a Teen Titans story and it has involved Trigon? We went again with Trigon? God, just the story of Raven and Trigon, it's just a story that never ends. Good God. You have to have Trigon appear throughout every Teen Titans show or Titans show or, anything that ties in with Titans. It always has to have Trigon. And I am so sick about hearing about Trigon. And the funny thing of it is that they showcase what Trigon is supposed to look like on this show. And then when he is actually presented in this show, he looks nothing like what they previously showcased him as. And then on top of that, like the person that they pick for it being Trigon doesn't make sense to me. I know this person from the show Castle, and to be brutally honest, I cannot see him being a villain. It doesn't make sense. It seems like certain things were just put on here as placeholders for them to eventually not even use in future things. Maybe they were just hoping that some things would just like eventually they would get enough money to in later seasons to have much more of a budget to do X amount of thing. Trigon was just a normal human. And then at the very end of this show, they have it to where, if you guys remember, there's a Justice League episode called The Man Who Has Everything. And where you have Superman being fused with this alien-esque like thing that gives him this fantasy island like place where he is the man that has everything. He has Krypton. He has a son. He has a wife. He has everything that he could have possibly ever imagined. But yet, at the very end of it, he has to give it all up. Reasonably, they do the exact same thing with Dick Grayson. They do the exact same thing. They give Dick Grayson the perfect life to where he ultimately puts Batman to rest, and he's in Gotham, and the Joker is showcased as dead, and all of the villains in Gotham are dead. Here's one thing that I'm really severely scratching my head about. Why is it that Dick Grayson, through this entire show, was never showcased as being in Bloodhaven? Why did he have to be in Detroit this entire show? Huh? Why did we have to have so many boring environments like a Detroit or an LA or anything that isn't actually tied to the DC world at all? We couldn't have had any of these characters in Coast City or Star City or whatever. No, they all had to be in a legitimate city for reasons. That is the thing that severely I'm scratching my head every single second after watching this show, just scratching away and just saying, why did these people have to be in actual settings, actual places? Why couldn't they have been in Bloodhaven? Why couldn't they have been in Star City? Even Coast City. Have we seen Coast City being used ever? Now, a lot of people could gripe, point out to me, well, they have Metropolis in this show. If you're going to say that they have Metropolis on this show, wow. That's what I'd have to say then. But we did have Gotham, I guess, in this show, so I guess points to them for using Gotham in the show for an episode or two or whatever the F they used. But anyways, I just whatever. Anyways, and here's the thing, why is it that a cop, even though he doesn't have jurisdictional things, like you evidently an LAPD cop can do police work anywhere, and it seems like was this cop retired? Was he not retired? Was he full active duty? Kind of for this guy's cases, can he just willy-nilly do anything? That seems so absurd that this guy can just do whatever because he's cop. Sounds bizarre that this cop can just do whatever because cop. Whatever. If he doesn't even have jurisdiction, he can just come in there and just like LAPD. Like I can just I'm gonna see this guy because I used to live in this town. Just whatever. But yeah, so we have Dick Grayson that is having the best world possible scenario. And so every one of his family members is basically dead. Alfred's dead. Jason's probably dead. I don't know if they confirm that or not, but any Robin is probably dead. They never bring up at one time. I don't think they ever bring up Barbara ever. I think they bring up Commissioner Gordon's dead. They bring up that Bruce is on the rampage of just going willy nilly and killing everybody. And so ultimately, that is supposedly Batman finally going rogue. Which ultimately, even in Injustice, when Superman goes rogue, Batman is always going to help out the criminals. There's never really one story where Batman ever really breaks his one rule. But then I guess I'm sure there's some other story where he probably has. or he probably has killed people, or done this, or done that. But at the end of the day, to say that Batman is a villain on this show, I scoff. Because Batman is only a villain in Dick's mind, in some dream fantasy sequence, which honestly and truly means nothing. Because ultimately, looking at it, it's just trying to turn Dick to the dark side. But there is no dark side in this show. There's only Trigon, which we've seen a billion times in a Titans like show. So, I look at this, and again, I really love this show, but then there's some things that kind of really do. I look at it and I'm just like, of course, this is a Warner Brothers show, so I'm like, oh. But I do have hope for the future of this show. I do like hearing that Superboy will be on the show, even though looking at it, they showcased Crypto. They showcased Crypto at the end of this show. Like, we're supposed to be jazzed about that. Good God. Can we get any tongue in can we stop doing the tongue in cheek kind of things to where it just feels like this show is trying to be the grandma that is trying I want to squeeze those cheeks. I want to squeeze them. I want to squeeze them. Like, that's what this show is kind of doing. It's trying to be like that, or it's like the grandmother, like, oh, let me squeeze those cheeks. Let me be all yum. Like, that's kind of what this show is kind of doing. It's kind of giving us stuff that it's like, why? Why do we need Crypto in this show? Um, if Beast Boy can't really do anything in this show, why have him in said show? You could have used anybody else that could have been showcased better. I would have been happy with Miss Martian being on this show, to be brutally honest, as a character. Um, I think you could have really had a character that people could have been really interested in. And it could have reminded people that it's like, hey, if you guys liked Young Justice, we're kind of in a little bit of a ways giving you that. So yeah, so that's kind of overall what I felt about Titans. I'm sure there's much more stuff I could say in the ways about talking about this show. But then again, I also don't want to go over all everything and take too long to review this as well. Um, Hawk and Dove, I think, was the best thing coming out of this entire show. The showcasing of Doom Patrol, I really liked. Because ultimately, I knew that origin story of Beast Boy, so I knew exactly how they were going to go about doing this. And I am kind of overall just kind of really hopeful that the show will get better. That I hope in future seasons, I hope that they will seem to put more money into the show. I hope. I hope. Um, but yeah, but other than that, that's all I could really say. Anyways, I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.